Everybody, welcome today. Nice, bright and breezy. Everybody is looking refreshed, educated. David looks a little bit confused, but that's his role to play here. And I think confused is what a lot of people are at the moment. We're here to talk about and have a nice, gentle discussion about the future of portals. Obviously, there's a lot going on in this space at the moment. Obviously, CoStar went on the market, exploded onto the scene. I think it was probably fair to say it was probably getting a little bit moribund in this space here, but that's all changed as it always does overnight. And clearly, REA.com putting in the bid for Rightmove has really got everybody talking. So rather than do our bluffers guide and pretend we know what we're talking about, we thought we should go to the source. And we are delighted to have over here Neil from Listing Logic. Hi, Neil. How are you?
Very well, thanks, mate. Pleased to be here.
So you're the inside track. We're going to be coming to you for all things REA in a second, just to give your kind of experience about it. I've got a bluffers guide. Obviously, me and Matt were involved with Reap It over in Australia, and I think no doubt we'll talk about the feedback we used to get from the Aussie agents there, which you're going to be able to summarize for us particularly well. Mal, obviously, model prop, Mr. AI. Is it an avatar on screen with us today, Mal, or is this the real you? I can't tell anymore.
You're not allowed to tell, so you're just gonna have to guess depending on what I say during things, and I can always then actually disclaim that I said anything at all. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll let you know.
Next time you say that, you can potentially not do it quite as threatening as it came across, passively aggressive.
It's just my avatar. What can he do?
Okay, good stuff. Well, obviously, all things AI, talk to Mal. We are joined from his salubrious hotel in Leeds, Matt Goddard, my compadre from days gone by, and at the moment. How are you, Matt? Looking very Steve Jobs there.
Yeah, very well, thanks. Yes, I've gone for that look. I'm just waiting for the turtlenecks to arrive. So I've just gone with the t-shirt for now, but all good in fresh and breezy Leeds this morning.
I think that's the most sensible stuff I've ever heard you say, mainly because I couldn't hear.
Has it done it again?
We're getting some of it.
Blame my avatar.
Blame your avatar. As long as you didn't get it from Mal, that's good. That's fine. That's okay. Okay, Matt. Well, look, you try and bear with us. Tell everyone in the rooms next to you to stop logging on to various sites. And then the wonderfully prepared David Mintz, who obviously you've read all the notes, haven't you, for today, David?
I know exactly why I'm here.
Kick us off the case study we were discussing.
I'm here. I'm very excited to be discussing the future of
your voice of the agent, of course, David, aren't you here? So I think you're obviously pretty well tuned in as well as anybody is to what people are saying on this out there. And can I just ask tee up the question here first and foremost? Where do we feel that people are? Where do we feel that UK agents are with this news about obviously REA, potentially bidding? Would I be right in thinking that there's a degree of nervousness
amongst the agents themselves? Yeah. I think the agents are a little bit bemused, and I think they could be forgiven for being a little bit cynical that it might that it's going to add value for them in a demonstrable way at the moment. I think they've seen CoStar obviously come on board with on the market, yeah, and not a massive change there. In fact, very little change going on at all. Almost like somebody's holding their breath to find out what someone else is going to do next. And I think when it comes to Rightmove, I think the agents know that they need to do business with Rightmove. They know that they're a key part of that incredible amount of profit that Rightmove generates. But more importantly, it is that sort of shop window that they have to the world. And if Rightmove or On the Market or any of the portals could introduce something that would add value to the agent, then that would be, we believe we've seen it all. That's the point.
That's what booming was clearly trying to do, wasn't it? When it exploded onto the scene, it was trying to do stuff that the Bruces felt the traditional portals weren't delivering. Clearly, obviously, it didn't work out for a variety of different reasons there. Neil, David just mentioned there obviously the profit margins, and I remember, as I always did when I make my mistakes, just before Matt jumps in, I remember when we opened up over there and we started doing our exploratory tours, and I was going around and talking to a lot of the Aussie agents, and they kept moaning about REA.com, and I was like, oh, honestly, you're taking the mickey. It's not going to be as bad as Rightmove, is it? Or the way that agents talk about it, you know, in terms of how explosive the prices was. And then, of course, I got into that dynamic around the, you know, it being a per listing model, or at least there being a per listing model there. Do you mind just giving us a kind of an overview from your point of view of how REA does work over there? And again, maybe how a little bit of background on them as a business.
Yeah, look, REA would position in the Australian marketplace as a preeminent marketplace for new listings, and now a variety of adjacent services across the real estate sector. I guess one of the things that needs to be, I guess we all need to be reminded of at some stage is that the portals have played a very significant role in developing not just the digital marketplace for real estate sector, but a whole range of other services that wrap around the marketplace. And so there's quite often a confusion between what REA's core business is, which is in effect the publisher of new listings content, and a range of ancillary revenue models that they've brought up alongside their relationship, not just with the real estate agent, but with the consumer. And they've been very, very successful in supporting and promoting the idea that vendor paid for advertising is the norm here in the Australia and New Zealand marketplace, which is slightly different, of course, to your marketplace in the UK, which kind of begs the question as to what would they bring to the UK going into such a different model, right? Given that they can't rely predominantly on vendor paid for marketing in your segment, unless the market gets alongside them and carries that journey into the vendor. Which is a very long path to take for REA. So that then tends to if you look at their ancillary services, that you're moving into finances, titles, insurances, moving, all of those things that we've seen before, they have actually got a very, very strong stable of offering in that network. And in the Australian sector, that has caused some friction, and it's caused them to clash with investments from the agencies themselves outside of the portal model. So there's a lot of complexity in the service end of the conversation. Number one, they provide a very valid service in the marketplace, and that won't go away. Number two, they're a very, very rational pricing machine, if you like, and they've got a very, very sophisticated way of doing that down to postcode basis. So if you're marketing a home in Eastern Sydney, which is a very wealthy suburb within the Australian marketplace, you might pay up to $8,000 to $12,000 to go through the realestate.com.au model.
Jesus,
right?
but I mean, that used to be about 5,000 or 6,000 Aussie dollars when I was, you know, sort of talking to agents over there. So that's as high as it goes up. That geolocation stuff.
Can do, yeah. Full service packages can get, but they're based on postcodes, right? So. And that's kind of a complexity that we don't often talk about. So when you're talking about an agent and going, look, it's 5% of my overall commission or income for the year, and they're in a much cheaper or sort of less expensive postcode, the story remains the same when you get into Sydney Eastern Base. Okay. Right? So unlike the real estate sector has a flat fee commission structure, by and large, we have a very fixed view of what our revenue is going to be based on transactions. REA doesn't have that. They have a much more sophisticated pricing mechanism across the entire marketplace, which is quite difficult to navigate.
I was just going to ask you, is it seen with suspicion by the agents that it is complex to the point of, you know, of doing that deliberately? So
I think, like all of us, if it's complex, or if you don't understand it, you know, it's your natural disposition to not trust it, you know, and that's just human nature. And quite often it's the right instinct. You know, so yeah, I think that there is some cynicism around why the pricing mechanisms are so complex. You know, they could be a telco, you know, based on their pricing mechanisms. You know what I mean? It's like you can swap them out.
No, what Neil just said there, really, thanks for that, Neil. That's really interesting to get that. Mal, that he's nailed that though, hasn't he? Is that we don't have that vendor paid advertising supporting, obviously, the pitch to the consumer to spend all those thousands of dollars here. They are a hugely professional organisation, REA.com. They will have done their due diligence. They haven't just come over here and just said, you know, it's so. What's your view on what are we missing, I suppose, other than the fact that they're obviously two very, you know, famously, apart from some South American sort of businesses, there aren't many with better profit margins.
Indeed, and obviously, Rightmove itself, with its 70% profit margin, is kind of one of those. I look at this very clearly from a sort of obviously my history is back in portal days, so I've been kind of grown up helping to launch a couple. And what I see from the difference from back then, which is kind of encapsulated by what REA has been able to do, is that this is a platform. So Rightmove's current subscription-based modelling is already phenomenally profitable, and it provides this opportunity for others to make a significant amount as a shareholder. But there's more to come. Those that have a different model, as REA does, when they look at our market in the UK, they see it as immature, and that actually there are numerous levers that they can pull, as they have done over in Australia, that will enable them to leverage even more from a market such as ours. We have one of the lowest fee rates in the world. Vendors actually pay very little compared with other sellers anywhere else, really. So I think that's kind of the lights behind the eyes of our Australian cousins, is to come across to actually start to build that model. As Neil says, that if we start to get vendor paid over here, then there is a potential that benefits agents a little bit, or at least can be tied to that, as in you're going to get 20% of the extra uplift, we'll take 80%. But I think it's a very dangerous kind of model, because as we've seen over in REA and Australia, it just means that there's even more of a complex and difficult to unwind relationship between an entity for whom cash generation is everything, and its customers, in air quotes, for whom customer service and servicing their vendors and making the difference from a quality perspective may be the predominant requirement. So it kind of recruits agents into a model where they are essentially salespeople for REA Group / Rightmove, and they are going out selling REA / Rightmove products. And I think that's a very concerning potential place for agents to look over the horizon at.
There is that level of complexity already here, though, isn't there? Famously, traditional, whatever they are, agents moaned about the online agency charging model, and latterly, obviously, the hybrid I don't know what they call it. Is it a geolocation charging model here or whatever else? But I know, again, David, that's something that there's a perception, isn't there, that those models get it cheaper than the traditional,
undoubtedly. Right now, if I was caught between sort of opening my own agency and taking out a Rightmove subscription and joining one of the sort of self-employed models where I can have it at, when I talk a fraction, we're talking under £200 a month. Whereas if you were to compare what I'd be paying to Rightmove, it would be over sort of £1,500 a month. So there is a bit of, there's a massive disparity, isn't there?
So Matt, ignoring the fact that David's just announced that Kerfuffle Hybrid Agency is about to launch, finally putting the nail in the coffin of that model. What do you see? Obviously, you know the Aussie market pretty much as well as anybody outside of it. What do you see as is happening? And obviously, we were talking about the future of the portals as well. Where do you see things at the moment?
For me, and you'll remember this from when we did the acquisition of Agent Box when we were still at Repeat, it's that diversification in the Australian market that's quite interesting, and there's a lot of things at play, such as first publisher first protocols and the changing of the Google cookies in terms of how people are publishing their content over and above the portals. And I know there's in our markets and there's markets within the UK, right? So it's whether it's in Leeds and Yorkshire versus central London versus the southwest. People will try to publish themselves, and you see people who have the early bird lists and the sort of approaches to get customers and consumers coming direct to them and dragging them away from the portal via things like their early bird list, the websites, and also seeing that Facebook and Instagram advertising and the Google ads. And I think they've been doing it really well in Australia for quite some time. and actually doing it. And obviously there's a large part of it to do with the vendor paid advertising is able to sort of have those campaigns and the building up to auctions in terms of that different model. But that's one of the interesting parts I've seen over in Australia. To the extent that I think it's Domain, and Neil will correct me if I'm wrong, Domain bought a really big digital marketing platform. I think it's AIM, that they actually went out and they're now trying to acquire that spend. So where the agents have tried to diversify and move on to social media as their way of advertising and basically doing sort of the old listings, sort of print listings, but digitally.
Yeah.
Now the portals are trying to get back into that segment, and it shows that if the portals are spending money on those publishers, then something must be right, because why else would they be going after that spend? So I think we dabble with it over here, and a lot of people focus on the organic sort of organic publishing and organic posts on social, but obviously you have to have a certain volume of followers to do that. Whereas in Australia and New Zealand, it's very much about those paid ads and very much the classified listings that we saw previously, but on the modern social platforms.
And Domain, just so everyone, for those that aren't Aussie junkies for the market there, Domain was very much their second portal, wasn't it, from what I understood? It was
for me, it's like the Zoopla of Australia, very much, and not just because of the fact that it's the second one, but because of the fact they have a tech play, and Domain have historically bought up a lot of tech, although, again, I think REA have been doing the same thing.
And actually, you know, Rightmove, obviously they bought Van Milder. They went out. Who was the other sort of logistics sort of intelligence company they bought?
Home Track.
Well, no, they bought a company. They wound it into Rightmove, but they haven't been particularly acquisitive, have they? But they seemingly getting more you know, exploratory in that road. Do we see a day where they're going to be giving back less in terms of dividends to shareholders, which obviously has been why they have been the darling of the stock exchange, and actually investing in that stuff in the way that obviously Zoopla did, buying all of the CRM companies. You've seen obviously OTM before CoStar, it has to be said, being quite acquisitive. What does anybody think there? Do we think that they are going to go down that REA play, Mal, and buy this?
Do you know what? So they had their investor day in November last year, 2023, and set out a 5-year plan. Now, Johan Svanstrom, new CEO, relatively new CEO, was from April 2023. So he's started to set out what his stall is and how he's going to approach it. And essentially, it's very much business as usual. The one thing that he kind of announced that was going to be different and might actually dip the margin from 70% down to about 68, was they were going to invest, I know, exactly, crying tears, was they were going to invest in mortgages. So they're going to try and build their mortgage line up from £2 million per year to 25 million over the next 5 years. But we did some calculations here in Model Prop about what that meant for agents. And actually their listing is still going to go up, unfortunately, but unsurprisingly. And they're going to breach the 2,000 per branch average revenue model per branch on average by the end of 2028. So that model does seem to be very consistent. I imagine that with REA coming in and positing a premium on the share price, that they're going to have to respond, and they're going to have to say they're going to do something quite exciting that's going to make sure everyone thinks, oh, actually, yeah, let's leave this management team in place. And I don't think that's going to be good news for agents either, to be fair, because I imagine they're going to have to say, well, look, we're going to do some of the stuff that REA was going to do, but not all of it. We're going to do it better, blah, blah. So yeah, so I don't think they're going to necessarily go hard into the tech side. I think they're going to probably try and run a little bit alongside, or at least show that they can try and match whatever REA is promising the shareholder.
Do you think this is going to cause, regardless of whether this, and obviously it has been rejected first time round, and I think, did I see somebody saying it would take 7 billion to make it interesting? One thing that Rightmove is always accused of, and I don't know whether it's unfair or not, is a lack of innovation, you know, and I know their argument will be, well, the public absolutely love it, and they love it for its simplicity and everything else. But do you think this, as far as I'm aware, the market cap hasn't particularly exploded over the last few years, has it? Even with that really high, you know, dividend payback. So do you think it will spark other people into play, maybe in terms of, you know, investors, to try and get Rightmove to do some things differently? What do you think on that point?
For me, I absolutely think that their innovation has been woeful. You know, absolutely. If you are making 70% margin plus and you are giving most of that back to shareholders, it is because, which they are doing in share buybacks and dividends, it's because you don't know what to do with all that money. There could have been so much investment in the industry, and this I think is my biggest complaint against Rightmove, is that it is scooping out so much money from our industry and then just pushing it externally instead of looking at how it might improve consumer journeys within this sector, how it might improve many other things about our property market that really needs help. But yeah, that I think is the big thing, is that they are not, and have shown very little appetite for real genuine innovation in this space. And I think that this might be a little shot in the arm, but I think it's not going to necessarily drive them to doing anything that's really creative and really sort of forward thinking.
Well, Neil, while I let Mal get back on the fence there, obviously, because it hasn't been clear how he feels about the the lack of innovation there. Could you talk to us what I keep hearing about, how other solutions, mainly, Facebook or social media, are going to be the savior of breaking the stranglehold of the portals and everything else there. Would you mind talking us to how you see things happening over Australia, especially around the paid advertising area as well, to see what other agents are doing to kind of do things differently?
Yeah, sure. Look, just one thing before I get to that. The twist between innovation is a tricky one, right? Because if you look at what REA have done over the years, they have invested significant amounts into innovation, and it's been considered an incursion in some instances into the sector, right? So it's a bit of a double-edged sword for a portal who wants to innovate really aggressively, improve consumer experience, try and change habit, get people caring about alternative ways of getting the best results for the vendor and the agent, right? So we need to be mindful of that too as we cover off this sort of content. But at the same time, if you look at what if you were to ask me, what do you think credible threats are to shifting the portal's view of a never-ending cycle of increasing revenues and minimalistic terms of investment around technology, I'd say that we quite often go back to looking at them purely as a publisher, right? And we look at the real estate sector with a publishing lens, and we see lots of high value, high repeat content coming out of the real estate sector, new listings content. And we just happen to have Meta and Google at the moment very hungry for content, just as News Corp and the other publishers are. But the big difference currently is, we've got this thing called the mobile, and that sort of content is jet fuel for the likes of Meta, who want to keep people on their platform, particularly if it's postcode based. So we have seen a significant interest in that channel, both from portals, aggregators like CoreLogic and other technology providers in the marketplace, creating a more direct relationship on a postcode basis with new listings content, which for most agencies in most markets is nothing new. Other than the fact that there's eyeballs now on Meta and a mobile phone that weren't there 5 years ago. So we are seeing a lot of lean into that. Matt's reference to domain buying, I think it was Campaign Track, who had a very strong Meta play. That was acquired for 180 mil. It wasn't chicken change. It was a significant investment, and that was their challenge to get into that vendor paid for advertising. CoreLogic bought a product down here just recently for about 25 mil, again to acquire vendor paid for access to metadata. And the segue to that is, why are they so data hungry? The portals sell it, package it. It's certainly a new revenue stream for REA, relatively new. I think last year they posted a $90 million standalone revenue line for data in their books. So it's getting people's attention, right? But on the flip side, also the one thing that is quite often talked about down here is a term called mutuality, which is when you talk about data and people spending money through these channels, where does it go, right? And so at one level, that the real estate sector is going, well, we create this beautiful content, and the first thing we do is give it to a portal to publish it first. No other publishing sector does that. So it's quite an original piece, and the implications of that are quite significant, because Meta and Google will consider the portals as first publishers of that content. And that has some significant impact on how the real estate agent moving forward is recognized by Meta and Google from a publishing perspective. So there is certainly a shift on how agencies change the publishing sequence of their new listings content to maximize the benefit to them first, their agency second, and the vendor, right? So That's certainly
Sorry,
changing.
Neil, just on that. So just so I understand it, and again, the clues in the name, Simple Simon. So am I getting there that kind of that point about the data, and it makes me I get a little float there because it feels like Josh Fegan talking to me again. Am I right in thinking they need to be addressing that because otherwise they won't be doing as well? What in terms of natural search, in terms of SEO and things like that?
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, all of that goes with being first publisher, right?
Okay,
And
right.
if you look at it, I don't think it was a master plan. I think it just kind of evolved naturally with the advent of better technology and cameras and the ability to display a home. And then along came the desktop and Google, which is great. Now we've got social and mobile, right? Which is a different combo, which doesn't actually suit the portals very well at all, to be honest. And it's certainly you're looking at the metas of the world going beelining to the content owner, which in this case is the agent. And so there's a lot of power shift in that one concept. And it's just sort of emerging when you start thinking about the implications of delaying, 20,000 listings a day by going to a portal, delaying that by a day or two. And it's starting to happen here in Australia and New Zealand. The portals don't like it. They're trying to slow it down. And unfortunately, down here, it's a bit of a national sport, kind of chasing the portals around. And if they've reacted in a negative way, everyone feels like that's probably a good sign that there's more to be done on the first publisher piece, which is a very, very old-fashioned orthodox licensing concept that's come out of, ironically, News Corp predominantly for paid content. So,
Wow.
And look, I know you're far too noble. You wouldn't have obviously promoted yourself, but talk about how your own business is doing stuff on there. And just for clarity, we've tied up with you guys on the Relocation Agent Network, aren't we? And we're seeing some absolutely. In fact, Matt, I'll save Neil here. Do you want to just talk about what some of those stats are coming through in terms of the tool that Neil's providing for our clients?
Yeah, so just on the point you made there, so we've used Listing Logic white labeled for Relocation Agent Network, ran digital, and people like Duncan Yeardley are using it. I think Duncan Yeardley's last set of campaigns were hitting something like 29% click-through rate on them. But it's the platform, just going back to our old pals at Repit, is fully integrated with Repit. And so as those listings come in, if you take someone like Rupert down at the London broker, as they publish a new listing in Repit, and this market is for sale available, the platform automatically runs that campaign, turns the images into a lovely bit of creative that actually targets the people in the custom audience, it's called. So actually looks at the people who the content's relevant to in the certain area that property sits in, and it's all fully automated so that if you've been looking at 2-bed properties in Chelsea Barracks, you will only see 2-bed properties in Chelsea Barracks when you're on there, and it appears in your Instagram reels, it appears in all the placements of the paid advertising. So it's very much the sort of the t-shirt that follows you around the internet. So even when you've looked at a particular pair of trainers, for example, that's the way that it works in terms of the platform. So you sort of see those go through. But coming back to Neil's point about the delay, if you remember when On the Market appeared on the scene and they made all of us as CRMs put that delay in for, I think it was 24 hours initially. We built that into Repit, so you could put so we went to Repit. It's not just on the market. Any particularly on Repit, we've now got integrations with other CRMs. Is the content goes out onto the website. Then there's a paid campaign that runs alongside that, and then eventually, however many days or hours later, it goes onto the portal. So you've got that opportunity to draw the people in and see you as the first publisher in that respect.
Amazing.
Can I just jump in on that? I think that 24-hour delay or whatever it was that OTM always had built in wasn't particularly well received by every agent. And more importantly, I think you've got to understand how we operate as agents, very much under pressure from our new clients. So my clients, when I go and see Mrs. Giggins and she signs my paperwork, she expects to see that on Rightmove tomorrow morning. She wants it out there. Now, when I turn around to her and say, well, actually, Mrs. Giggins, I like to hold this content back because it's better for me. And I try and sell her a benefit that says it's better for her.
Yeah.
And she will turn around to me and say, well, how is withholding my property details from thousands and thousands of UK buyers going to be better for me? So I think we have to sort of be mindful that there's a massive gap and a leap in faith that we sort of need to bridge here in order to sort of convince the clients and the public. And I think that's always been the Rightmove's strongest thing, is that, you know, Mal's right, they have been absolutely woeful in terms of innovation, but to a certain extent that doesn't matter as long as every member of the public makes searching for a property synonymous with Rightmove. And their job there is then done. And if we are then to sort of rely on agents to start to introduce a vendor paid advertising model here in this country, I believe we're years off that, because we still not got agents charging a full fee. And so we know that they have difficulty with that. And I think it'll be a massive shift. And my worry as an agent is that people like Rightmove and OTM will understand that we're going to be bad at selling that model to our clients, and instead they will start to see the client themselves as the next big thing that they can tap into. So I mean, you mentioned, Simon, earlier the booming model, which perhaps was a little bit ahead of its time, but in principle the idea of selling furniture, insurance, mortgages, lampshades, whatever it may be, to help somebody to move house, the actual lifetime value of a customer doesn't need to be limited to just the period of time that they're looking for a house. Rightmove will say, well, we've got their details, they're on our system, let's sell to them over a period of 10 years instead of just for 6 months. So it's interesting.
Mal, do agents have the long-term view to be able to tap into that, or is that why it has to be things like the portals who are going to look at those wider opportunities?
I think that some of the more forward-thinking ones are starting to look at that. But look, I think you're right. It's been, you know, if you go back to sort of Purple Bricks time, you know, the impact of them on fee rates was so huge, and we're only just about kind of starting to recover to sort of 1.3s from 0.75s and craziness down there. And in certain markets, it's still down there. But essentially, there's been a lot of hand to mouth, right? You know, a lot of agents have just been able to kind of barely survive through a period, and that also included, you know, a lot of kind of upheaval and generally across the macro market. So I do think that there is an appetite out there, and again, you know, absolutely, David, you know, what he says about the vendors are really, you know, they don't care, right? They're just thinking, well, I need to get up onto Rightmove. So I think that there's a piece in there that is about how do you tell a vendor that Rightmove isn't the be-all and end-all? All right. And I think those conversations really have to start like in earnest quickly. And like Neil says, you know, that 24-hour window where you can do some other funky stuff, get it out onto social media, do some like really creative things. That window, by the way, is important absolutely right now for Google and for Meta, but it's also going to be really, really important for AI. All right. If you ask ChatGPT, who's the best estate agent in Basingstoke?
Yeah.
All it goes on is who are the first publishers of that data in that particular area, what their reviews are and things like that, or who's got a 3-bedroom property with a nice view and is near the station. Then again, it will go on what it knows from its collection of the internet about who is active in that area and who's publishing stuff. So if the portals are continuing to be the first publishers in that, then you know what you're doing is baking in a problem not just now but for the future. So I really think that these conversations about why Rightmove isn't the be-all and end-all really have to start now. The best time for them to start was 25 years ago. The second best time is right now, because there are things that you have to be doing as an agent right now to stop this baking in, this locking in of those guys as being the place to go. So I think that's really critical. But yeah, look, I think that for agents, it's really complex to start those different conversations, because I think for so long we've just been so used to, or agents have just been so used to, just kind of going, well, Rightmove's the answer. Everybody says Rightmove's the answer, so it's the answer. We've got to start thinking about how you unpick that consciousness that's almost kind of part of the moving house process, because there's so much else out there that people need to be doing that the buyers are going to be using going forwards. to try and find their dream home that isn't just this one shot Rightmove.
It strikes me there's an overriding point here, as it always should be, is around just education. As David obviously quite rightly says, there's that massive tension between the vendor wanting it straight up on the internet and everywhere, and actually being able to educate them as to why that's not the best thing. I think there's always, we are much more creatures of, we're far more reactive here though than strategic. That I think that I see what I see the Aussie agents doing well in looking at the two markets. They are very, obviously I think they're the world's best in terms of marketing anyway there. So there really does have to be a much better approach on that basis to make people realize why they should be doing these things. But that's I always remember it was James Connell, wasn't it, Matt, who one of the owners of Marshall White's, and I think that we were having philosophical discussions over the differences between the Aussie market and the UK market, and this idea that it was always a land of milk and honey in Australia, and that auctions, the whole auction side of things it hasn't been done forever. They had to educate the public over 20-30 years to make sure that they really did understand that that was one of the very best ways of selling your property for the best rate, to have the vendor paid advertising that supports it. Not all of this stuff was, it didn't happen accidentally, did it, Neil? I don't think that's fair to say, isn't it?
No, you're 100% right, and it is I guess a thing of evolution, really, as opposed to revolution, and to some extent. And look, in terms of what David was saying, he's right. Like, the day-to-day grind of matching a property with a buyer and getting that marketing budget out, and the emotional, that's the reality of our industry, and quite often you don't have the oxygen to sort of plan what we're going to be doing in 5 years' time, and we certainly don't have the wind to change a vendor's opinion about what they think a portal should or shouldn't be doing for their property. And saying that, what we're heading towards, and I take up Mal's point around what AI is in all of this front, and my gut feel in terms of why the portals are so thirsty for this new line of data coming out of Meta attached to a property, whether it be first publisher or first, is what they're going to feed the machine around AI. And I certainly also would place a bet on the idea that a consumer is going to go somewhere to find something, that search experience that the desktop and Google, and in this case Portal, have done very, very well at, and evolved our marketplace in a very positive way, is going to go into matching. So if you talk about what a consumer being matched with property within the next 2 to 5 years, it's happening now, right? And if you look at the sort of data that you can get from a portal, as a real estate agent or vendor, you get to see a number that says this has been viewed by one person in the last 3 hours. That's about the extent of the data that you'll get back from your budget out of a portal.
Yeah.
You put that dollar through another channel and you'll get 60 to 70 different data points that will be completely irrelevant to some, but very relevant to others who want to evolve the marketplace in a positive and cost-effective way, and to follow the consumer on their mobile. And when I say follow, just match their what they care about, which is being seen on this thing, right? That's the of it. And that's actually not complex for most agents that I talk to on a day-to-day basis. Most agents have seen down here a 2-inch newspaper disappear in the last 2 decades. That was 2 inches of classified listing. That was the weekend. Right, natural disaster, and we're now talking about the agents having trouble keeping up with it. I don't believe that. I think agents are 100% committed to following the eyeballs to where they count, which is on this thing. And I think the portals have got a challenge in front of them if the penny drops around first publisher.
I'm going to read all those reports you were sending me through, Neil, that I should have read this week on that, and it feels like feels like that's my first education in terms of that. We're getting towards the end, but I just wanted to get people's kind of closing statements on this, really, and in terms of just to tee it off with the first thing is, I'll come to you first, Mal, but I'm going to preface it with, do you think REA will end up acquiring Rightmove?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it will not in the end, and I think that a lot to do with REA shareholders. They're not really very keen on the whole deal. REA are going to have to go even higher to try and get it. So yeah, I think those that are shorting Rightmove stocks right now are probably going to be making a little bit of money towards the end of this month. But I don't think that that's the kind of end of the story. I think that that this puts Rightmove on the slab, right? This kind of makes it appear,
isn't it now? Isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Rightmove was this untouchable kind of like it's just a cash machine, and for its shareholders that's fine. Now suddenly it's a potential acquisition, and is it really doing all the right things, and is there more money to be made in the UK market? So I think for agents, point of view, I think there's kind of three things that really need to be doing. One is to really work on genuinely. You work on a business recovery plan, right? If all the electricity dies and all that sort of stuff, and everything goes up in smoke, work on a portal recovery plan, right? What happens if you have to come off Rightmove? If they do, in the end, they're costing so much money that it's between them and your business. What are you going to do? And I think that kind of get a poor recovery plan where you actually think about what are the steps that are going to happen. What's the costs? What's the benefits? Do that and get that done as quickly as possible. I think next week we'll just look at alternatives. There are on the market, obviously, is coming in as David says. It perhaps hasn't been as wildly creative as you'd hoped from CoStar, but there's money there, and there's obviously intent. Jitty is another option that's free. Yes. Really great business, really cool. And then obviously look at AI, because that's the next thing that's coming down the track. But I think that it's going to be a really interesting next sort of 12 months particularly. But yes, I think Rightmove is now in play, and I think that's a very dangerous position for everybody to be.
I mean, we were talking about strategic vision. I mean, CoStar have got that in spades, haven't they? They will have a very clear 5-10 year, probably more plan than that, and turning this into I think that you made the point. I think the homes.com thing's an inevitability at some stage, isn't it? Can I just ask one quick question before we bounce off you though, Mal, in terms of where do you think Zoopla are in all this? Are they going to be squeezed, or are we just waiting for them? Or are we waiting to see how they evolve it?
It's really interesting. So you've probably seen as well that Zoopla has suddenly become massively more active over particularly the last 6 months or so. I think they were sponsoring, or they are sponsoring the England versus Australia days and all that sort of stuff, and they're sponsoring the Negotiator conference and things like that. So they are suddenly a lot more active, and they're sending out a lot more reports, which I think is important. However, I do see them as essentially a chip in play. Really, I think that the CoStar are probably as we speak. Consistently hammering on their door and saying, look, guys, you're going to get squeezed in the middle here. You've got to come across to us. So I would anticipate that Silver Lake, who own Zoopla, are going to do the grown-up thing and kind of just go, look, actually, why don't we just combine forces with CoStar and just kind of link arms together and go at Rightmove, rather than just, as everybody does as the third place challenger, just try and first of all kill the second before you go after number one. So I think that Zoopla is going to have to merge with CoStar at some stage.
Look, they've still got the CRM suite as well in there, haven't they? Which is probably quite an effective tool to have in there. And just if you're looking CoStar as well, Kerfuffle.com would make an amazing portal. So
I think Andy Flores is watching this absolutely right.
I'll be amazed. We're not streaming yet, but anyway.
That's how good they are.
Yeah, that's what I was a little bit. You when you say that, David, I was a little bit worried there. You're worried about how people know, because I did get an email through just as we were on there from my Rightmove contact. So it feels like I'm being disloyal in some way. They're onto us. I know. Be careful there, Mel. Matt, I'll tee it up again there. Do you think that deal will go ahead, and where do you see it go in the future of portals?
Well, I think firstly, just in terms of where the portals were at before all this came along. So as Mal said, on the market having CoStar come in, but also with Zoopla, the work they've been doing internally to understand the management consultants in, and it looks like they're splitting out into 3 separate businesses already. So it almost strikes me that portal piece is sort of being primed ready for that sell. And if it is a CoStar and we become a duopoly again in that respect, it really does prove. So whether it's an REA with Rightmove, or just see how that progresses. I thought what was telling as well is Rightmove launching the big campaign about their app to the consumer, which only cements David's point earlier about how do you get was it David Goggins, your vendor, or Mrs. Giggins, to move away. And it is that education piece, but I think more than anything, it just makes a bit of interest and a bit of noise around everything. And as I said, and David's point is valid in terms of what consumers are saying to you, but when you look around at businesses who are already doing that sort of delay and that focus on using their own leads that they've generated via the websites and the social media. People are doing that and being successful. If you look around at sort of the likes of Carl Norford and Mike Nettleton at Knock Dayton, they've got that sort of approach, and they must be bearing fruit from it. So I think REA aside, it's always quite an interesting landscape with those portals.
So I can't help notice that was the longest politician's answer. Do you think they are going to?
No.
Okay, all right. No, okay. So he's got 2 no's. Neil, as the man in the know, what's your view on it? Do you think do you think they'll get it over the line, REA, or do you think that's it's just not, it doesn't feel the right time?
Look, I think REA have got a proven record of making some pretty good bets on this front, and that they've executed well internationally in other marketplaces that are very complex compared to their own. So I think they're capable of putting the transaction through. I also agree that it's going to put, either way, it's going to put pressure on Rightmove's board, and the shareholders are going to expect more from them moving forward, given that REA are a very, very rational and successful player in this space. And they would have taken aim very, very seriously on the Rightmove discussion. But in the weight of things, given the local response down here, like the REA shareholder hasn't jumped up and down in happiness about it. It would be a long story. And I'd say, if I had to bet on it, I'd say no. And I'd suspect that the second prize will go to Trade Me, who I suspect they're also looking at. There's always a backup plan on this kind of thing. And there'll be a deal team there Thursday to do something. So if it's not Rightmove, it'll be something else in the next 12 months.
Okay, that's fascinating. Thanks so much for your input on that. And David, I suppose I have to say, obviously, the most important, the voice of the agent. You guys are still important. I concede.
Well,
prop tech isn't everything, so.
Well, as an agent, I think I speak for everybody when I say 2 billion quid is a hell of a gap to close in negotiation. And it's not small money at all, so we need to sort of be mindful of that.
If they spend that money, David, it's almost like they're going to have to make it up in some other way, isn't it? So that's the reality of it, isn't it? That gap needs to be got from somewhere.
It is, and I think that you probably got a little bit more to worry about as agents. We hate change, and we like things the way that they are, and that's why we've stuck with Rightmove and the charging model for as long as we have, because we've swallowed it. But do we love the prospect of Rupert Murdoch coming in and getting involved in our industry?
Yeah,
probably not.
Yeah, that's just one point you made there is quite interesting. You said you hate change, and that every agent critiques Rightmove for a lack of innovation. I find that juxtaposition quite
well. It's a case of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And for better or for worse, whether or not they've innovated or not, Rightmove does what it professes to do. It delivers you a steady stream of leads. Everybody knows that they'll find their property there, and that's it. If you ask an agent, what would you like Rightmove to innovate? What would you like them to do? That's a harder question, and that's a different panel show for another time.
It is. And another one, by the way, I've just realised you and Matt clearly, obviously, were texting each other to find out which outfit to wear. It does look a little bit bizarrely like You're My Bouncers, which I've got to say I quite like the whole imagery. So that's great. Guys, I think that's really, really interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of talk going on at the moment here, and obviously we need to catch up with that and see where it goes in a few months. I'm going to say, for the moment, obviously, my good pal, Mr. Goddard there, he's out there consulting on all matter of things, agency and tech as well. If you need to talk to anybody AI related, we've got Mr. Mal McCallion there, and his avatar or himself will deal with you. Depends on the size of your agency. If you're one office, it'll just be the avatar. If it's 10, you get the real deal. And Neil, fantastic. And again, thank you for all the help you're giving our agents on the RAN side of things. That's a really, really interesting solution. So reach out to those guys directly, or you can come to us, obviously, and look at their landing pages on Kerfuffle and get a bit more information about them as well. And Dave, I'll see you in a couple of minutes on our 77th Zoom of the morning.
Wild horses and Rupert Murdoch couldn't stop me. I'm there.
All right. Cheers, guys. Thanks very much.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.